You know, Neil, April 23rd has come and gone. It is now April 24th, and normally that shouldn't be remarkable, but it is remarkable because the end of the world was supposed to happen on April 23rd.
Yes, Nibiru was supposed to have appeared in the skies and devastated the Earth through gravitational pull and so
As is exactly what happens when a giant planet appears out of nowhere and gets too close to the Earth. We are talking, of course, about Planet X. Yes, it's reared its ugly crust again. And according to the techtimes.com, we reported on it the other day, Planet X to appear in the sky on April 23rd, according to a numerologist. But what does the science say? Now, obviously, this has been and gone. Nothing happened, nothing even remotely scary happened. It says here, the hypothetical Planet X will rise on April 23rd, 2018, according to a now viral but incorrect report. It links the supposed celestial event into a doomsday scenario. Conspiracy theorists claim that the Sun, Moon, and Jupiter will be in Virgo, and they will appear with Planet X, or Nibiru, 11 days from now. 9 stars of Leo, the planets Mercury, Venus, and Mars, and the constellation, how do I pronounce this? Serpens Ophiuchus will also join the lineup. Oh, that's good. This celestial event is supposedly referred in a Bible verse which spoke of the second coming of Jesus and the beginning of the rapture. So it's down to the rapture again. We've had that before, haven't we?
Yeah, it's all... Well, it seems to be people desperate for the rapture to happen.
Yeah, so the book of Revelation, which is the very last book in the Bible, where it says this is when the world's going to end, it will happen this way. And people have been decoding that or trying to decode that for hundreds of years.
Nibiru is a funny one because it's not necessarily just a Christian conspiracy. It's like flat earthers like it. There's a lot of sort of science denialist type like the Nibiru thing. That there's been this hidden planet in the universe that's got like a 10 or 20,000 years.
Oh wait, the flat earthers like it. So do they believe it's a sphere or is it a big flat disc coming towards us?
Weirdly enough, they have admitted other planets are spheres, like Mars.
But ours isn't.
But ours isn't, yeah.
Yes.
Very strange. But it's got like a 10 or 20,000 year orbit of the sun, and it comes really close and then it disrupts everything and causes chaos and death, and there's no evidence of this whatsoever. But what they've hung their hat on is the fact that NASA now think there is a 10th planet because the maths they've done through the way they can see planets and like Pluto, which is not a planet, it's a
planetoid or
yeah, whatever they call them these
dwarf
days.
planet.
Dwarf planet,
yeah.
That's the one. They can tell their orbits are slightly out, so there must be something out there, and they've done the maths. So obviously these Nibiru people have picked up on that and said, aha, see, we were right.
Yeah, it could be. It might be a moon of Pluto. It could be anything. It could be
meant to be
remnant of the Oort cloud.
Yeah, it could be, but it is supposed to be quite large, this thing. The maths say this thing is supposed to be quite large, but there's no evidence that it comes in every 10,000 years and completely disrupts the whole of the solar system. It's just... They're just using whatever piece of information they find to try to justify their nonsense stories, as usual.
Yeah, well, the article explains, the hypothesis goes that there is a giant planet with an unusual orbit, about 20 times farther around the Sun, far beyond Pluto. It could have a mass of about 10 times that of the Earth, and could take between 10,000 and 20,000 years to make a full orbit. How do they know this?
Okay, this is... I don't know if this is the bit from NASA. So this could be from NASA. There is a planet out there, they believe, from the way things are working, that does take about 10 or 20,000 years to go around the Sun, and it does have an unusual orbit. But the Nibiru people are taking this up to say it's their planet they've talking about all along, because they've been saying this planet is literally just round the back of Jupiter, just going to come through, and it's not the same.
So when science happens to kind of intersect with their conspiracy, they hijack the science and say, see, that's us.
Yeah, but when you look into what they originally were saying about Nibiru, it doesn't match in any way, shape or form.
So I would suggest to everyone to go back and look at old conspiracy reports about Planet X, and it probably won't match what they're saying now, I would guess. That's my own conspiracy theory.
I would love someone to research how many times Nibiru is supposed to have appeared to the eye and supposed to have created chaos.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. There isn't a hidden planet out there. We
No.
would know. We would have so many years notice from NASA, from even
amateur astronomers would spot it.
That's the thing. That's what I was going to say, because obviously they're going to say, no, it's a conspiracy theory because the government and NASA don't want you to know about it. I'm pretty sure that's going to be on their website somewhere.
NASA must be exhausted, all this fake pictures and things and cover-ups they have to do and keeping people quiet and their relatives quiet and their dogs quiet. It's just must be exhausting.
But this is a thing that there is no way you could hide it from amateur astronomers, so
yes,
it would be out there years and years in advance,
yeah,
and it'll be massive news. And when we do find the next planet, it's going to be huge news. But it won't be just poking its head around the back of Jupiter. It'll be way out beyond the Oort cloud.
That's it. And it will make a great film with starring, I don't know, The Rock or something. You know,
oh yeah, because now we're going to, The Rock will go up there and mine it for some.
Yeah, or just punch it back into orbit or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, strange beliefs and that kind of thing. That's no stranger to what we talk about in Talk Belief News. And an article that you showed me yesterday, which I thought we definitely have to talk about this, which comes from the almonitor.com, why so many Turks are losing faith in Islam. Now, this is interesting because I thought they were quite sort of entrenched in their beliefs in Turkey. So there's a report that came out, and it's called "The Youth is Sliding to Deism." Now, this document shared surprising observations about the very young people that Turkish society often expects to be the most religious, the students of the state-sponsored religious Imam Hatip schools. The report says that because archaic interpretations of Islam cannot persuade the new generation on issues such as the problem of evil, that is, why God allows evil to take place, some Imam Hatip students have begun questioning the faith. Instead of adopting atheism, which of course is a lack of belief in God or gods, the report added, these post-Islamic youths embrace the milder alternative, deism, or the belief in God but without religion. I think deism, though, is like, for instance, you think, yeah, there is a God, but he probably created the universe and then just retreated back to his dimension and doesn't really interact.
I think a lot of people who have left the religion and are now atheists will completely recognise this part of their journey, where they gave up on whichever scripture they were reading. Think, oh, but there's still something out there. That's how I felt for quite a number of years.
You can't just drop it all together. You have this sort of buffer.
Takes a while.
Yeah, these years where you say, well, I'm spiritual, or I think there's something out there.
Yeah,
but you're rejecting certain elements of the religion, which is, I think, what the kids are doing in this case.
But what's really surprising is that there has been a real concerted effort in Turkey to sort of get rid of their secular state, and they're trying to turn it towards an Islamic state. So it's really interesting that the youth are sort of rebelling against this.
Yeah, and the article goes on to say that Mustafa Öztürk, a progressive Islamic theologian who writes a column in the Daily Karar, said in April 2017 there was a piece titled "The Footsteps of Deism." He argued that despite the conviction among religious conservatives that they are in the midst of a golden age, something very fundamental is slipping out of their hands as the new generations are getting indifferent, even distant to the Islamic worldview. So the question becomes, why are so many Turks losing their faith? There was another columnist who he was very pro-government. He said it's because of the hedonistic, materialistic, and degenerate culture coming from the West, so it's blaming the West yet again. But there are other commentators who have said that the real reason for the loss of faith in Islam is not the West, but Turkey itself. It's a reaction to all the corruption, arrogance, narrow-mindedness, bigotry, cruelty, and crudeness displayed in the name of Islam.
If they're getting the news and they're looking what's actually happening, they know full well that their government is trying to turn it into Islamic State, and it's very corrupt society and government, and
they're not going to stand that for anymore.
No, exactly. And a lot of these things, it always seems the Conservatives think they're in a golden age. Well, the Trump supporters think they're in a golden age right now, but there's always a backlash to these things.
Yeah.
I find it interesting though, because over here in the Brexit debate, we were told there was 70 million Turks about to move to the UK, and half of them were going to be Islamic terrorists or whatever. But I've always tried to say to people, the thing we don't hear enough in the West is how quickly people are losing their faith in Islamist countries. We don't hear that very much. I mean, the great example was Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion.
Yes, the number of downloads.
Biggest country download, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And that is the most Islamic state. So
which obviously means they're doing it in secret. They can't go. Well, they wouldn't be able to buy the hardback, I don't think, or even order it. It would be traced.
Oh yes.
But maybe they're doing a little bit of torrenting and get secret copies of it.
So this whole argument about however many millions of Islamists are going to be coming to the country is complete nonsense. I mean, in fact, we should be supporting people who are trying to leave these countries because they're being persecuted for losing their faith. And there's a lot of people in jails in Saudi Arabia and those sort of countries who are in jail literally for losing their faith and having the guts to speak up about it.
That's right. And there are some other columnists who have weighed in on this. There was one who said that the real problem was within the very sphere of Islam, within the deep contradictions between the conservatives' alleged ideals and actual practices, as well as within the dogmatic clerics and the ignorance, animosity, and immorality among Islamic communities. I mean, this happens all over the world. We see what's going on in America now with the problem of guns. The current government is doing absolutely nothing about it. People are getting killed, and the kids are just walking out of school. They said they've had enough. And that's the generation that seems to be making, or will be making, a difference.
Yeah, they have a lot more information at their hands, so they don't just have to listen to their pastor that's telling them what is the truth, or their imam that's telling them the truth. They can go out and investigate stuff for themselves, and they don't like what they're seeing.
No, and they can do something about it, and they are doing something about it, and they will be the next government, and hopefully all over the world we'll get a more secular and fair and caring global society.
Well, yeah, and in our interview with Andrew Copson, we did touch on this. We asked him how he thinks the world's going to go, and he said it could go in a very, very bad way. If you look at what's happening in Turkey and you look at what's happening in America, we could go down that route. But he said he's got a feeling actually there will be a sort of almost rebellion from the secular society, and we will use secular and humanist values to build future governments on.
Because if ultimately every single one of us wants to be calm and peaceful and happy, we're going to get to a point where we're fed up of killing and blowing stuff up and running around.
It's already happening.
Problems.
It's already happening. I mean, there are less violent acts than there ever has been. Even with the Syrian issue that's going on right now, we're still a much safer world than we've ever been. And I don't see any reason why they won't continue if we can sort climate change out.
Yes, indeed. We're going to do a climate change special one of these days. Okay, the last thing we're going to look at, this again, it ties into why the world is in the state it's in. This comes from the Huffington Post. A sobbing child told the pontiff his dead father was a good man, but he wondered if a non-believer could be in heaven. So you've probably seen this. There's a video taken of it. The Pope, he visited the St. Paul of the Cross parish church on the outskirts of Rome, and there was a question and answer session with children of the parish, and this little boy approached the microphone. He kind of froze, and all the priests beckoned him to come closer, which looked kind of creepy. And then Pope Francis held the boy to his ear, and the boy said, I have a father who's died. He didn't believe in God. I'm afraid, he's gone to hell. Has he gone to heaven? And so apparently what the Pope said to him, which was revealed later, is that that man did not have the gift of faith. He wasn't a believer, but he did have his children baptized, and he had a good heart. So, and it's interesting, he went on to say that God decides who goes to heaven, and that God has the heart of a father. So he asked the young girls and boys in the audience if they thought God would abandon a father like this little boy's, and the children shouted back, no. So the children know better than God.
Well, what's interesting is then the Pope went on to say there, Emmanuel, that is the answer. God surely was proud of your father, because it's easier as a believer to baptise your children than to baptise them when you're not a non-believer. Surely this pleased God very much. Well,
he speaks for God, so it must be true.
Yeah, but that's not the first time he's basically said you don't need to be a believer to get into heaven.
Yeah, well, he's the infallible Pope. He can rewrite the Bible, which he did. He's already said that hell probably doesn't exist, and of course... Well,
this sort of language sort of would make you believe that...
he is acknowledging it in a way.
The interview that... well, I don't know. The interview we talked about in a previous episode where he said hell doesn't exist to the reporter, and then the Vatican said, no, that's not what happened. This sort of language makes you think, well, maybe that did happen. Maybe the Pope did say that.
I think he needs a sort of a Sarah Sanders sort of equivalent. The Pope didn't actually mean that.
Yeah, exactly. But it is interesting because he's acknowledged before that atheists can do good stuff, and obviously we all know that's true. It's just nonsense to say we don't. Atheists volunteer just as much as any religious person. If you look at all the stats, there's no higher moral code for religious people and non-religious people, so let's not dig into that too deeply, but just had to be said. But yeah, it's just shocking really that people haven't picked up on the bit where he basically said no.
Yeah.
He basically said, there's your answer. God wouldn't do that.
See, because we are changing, as a society. If this happened maybe a few hundred years ago, he would probably say to the child, if he didn't believe in your Lord Jesus Christ, I'm afraid there's no hope for him, which would give the kid nightmares for the rest of his life, no doubt. But the problem exists that there is still thousands of people who base their whole life on this ancient text, which says there is no hope for people who don't follow this particular religion and are going to a place of annihilation or loneliness or burning alive, which has resulted in a 5-year-old child being so upset that he burst into tears.
Yeah, and I mean this is replicated throughout the world, people living in fear of the sin and hell and that, so we need to...
Yeah, I think on some level the Pope is he's rethinking this whole thing, and perhaps incidents like this mean that, who knows, before it disappears altogether, perhaps Christianity will morph. Well, it's been morphing for 2,000 years, but...
This will be a big one though, won't it?
Yeah.
No hell, and as long as you're a good person, you get into heaven.
Yeah, that's they call it the universalist theory, that everyone gets into heaven. Yeah, everyone gets into heaven, yeah.
Yeah, it's a strange one, and well, no doubt we're going to come back to it. Now, as I often say when we're talking about the Pope, this is a good thing. So now, next step would be to stop going to Russia and gay bashing and tell people in Africa to use condoms.
Well, that's going to be hard, That's a difficult one. But you never know. You never know. Yeah. So I think as long as the world doesn't end next week, and I'm sure there's one of those brewing somewhere, we'll have to check back to see if the world's improved that little bit. And I think every time we do a show, I think the world has improved a little bit since the week before.
I mean, we have setbacks. It's two steps forward, one step back type scenario at the moment.
It might always be like that. There's no sort of utopia. I don't think there's a utopia coming, but it's certainly a better world coming, and in a lot of ways it's already here.
We should do a program on utopia. I read a very good book recently that talks about utopia, and the name of the book is Utopia for Realists.
Ooh.
I've read it over Christmas. I'll go back, reread and get some facts from it, and we'll talk about utopia and why it does exist.
That's really encouraging, but I have a feeling there are people out there who have a different idea of what utopia is.
Indeed, indeed.
A perfect world would be if those people across the street didn't exist, that kind of thing. But hopefully everything will come out in the wash. And we'll check back next week and see how the world is doing.